It is 8:45 a.m. on the morning of April 24th, 2013, in Savar, a suburb of Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh. There is already bustling activity. Thousands of workers are flocking to their workplaces in the textile factories of Rana Plaza, an 8-story building that reaches into the sky like a monument to the global textile industry. Most of the workers are women, young, between 18 and 35 years old. They come from the rural areas of the country, lured by the hope of a better standard of living. But what they do not know, this will be the last normal workday for many of them. The evening before, engineers had already discovered deep cracks in the walls of the building. The cracks were so concerning that the shops and the bank on the ground floor remained closed, but the factory owners on the upper floors urged their workers to return. The building is safe, they assured. The cracks are only superficial. About 3,200 people enter Rana Plaza this morning, unaware that they are in a building that is already doomed. Rana Plaza had never been planned for industrial use. Originally designed as a 6-story commercial and office building, the owner Sohail Rana had arbitrarily added 2 more floors. Without a building permit, without structural calculations, without safety inspections, the heavy industrial sewing machines that were installed on the upper floors generated vibrations for which the foundation was never designed. Experts would later determine that the building was already structurally unstable before the collapse. A house of cards made of concrete and steel, held together only by hope and greed for profit. At 8:57 a.m., the earth begins to shake. Not from an earthquake, but from the collapse of one of the deadliest industrial accidents in history. Within 90 seconds, the entire building collapses in on itself. 8 floors become a chaotic mountain of crushing concrete, twisted metal, and human screams. The noise is deafening, a thundering crash, followed by a ghostly silence, broken only by the whimpering of those buried. 1,134 people lose their lives on this day. Another 2,500 are injured, many of them severely. It is the greatest building disaster in the history of the textile industry, and one of the deadliest workplace accidents worldwide. But these numbers tell only a fraction of the story. Behind every number hides a person, a daughter, a mother, a son, who went to work that morning and would never return home. Rescue operations begin just minutes after the collapse. Neighbors, relatives, and volunteers dig through the rubble with their bare hands. The air is filled with dust and despair. Bangladesh's rescue forces are poorly equipped for a disaster of this magnitude, but they work tirelessly. Disaster of this magnitude. International help arrives, experts with special cameras, dogs, and heavy equipment. The recovery efforts last for 17 days. 17 days in which the world looks at this mountain of rubble and asks itself, how could it come to this? The answer lies hidden in a system that reaches far beyond the borders of Bangladesh. Bangladesh is the second largest textile exporter in the world after China. Over 4 million people work in the country's textile industry. 80% of them are women. They sew clothing for brands whose names can be found in every wardrobe in Europe, North America, and Australia. In 2013, the minimum wage for textile workers in Bangladesh is just $38 per month, one of the lowest in the world. These low wages are no coincidence. They are the result of a global competition for the cheapest production costs. Every year, over 90 billion items of clothing are produced worldwide, enough to give every person on Earth more than 12 new outfits. Rana Plaza housed 5 textile factories: Phantom Apparels, Phantom Tag, Ether Tags, New Wave Style, and New Wave Bottoms. These factories produced clothing for international brands and retailers. After the collapse, items of clothing with labels from well-known Western brands were found in the rubble. Silent witnesses of a connection between consumers in rich countries and the workers in the factories of Bangladesh. But Rana Plaza is not an isolated case. Already 5 months earlier, in November 2012, the Tesserine fashion factory in Dakar had burned down. 117 people died in the flames because emergency exits were locked and fire escapes were missing. In India, a textile factory in New Delhi collapsed in 2013 and cost 10 people their lives. A year later, a 4-story building housing a textile factory collapsed in Lagos, Nigeria. 15 dead. In Turkey, a jeans factory exploded in 2016 due to unsafe chemical storage. In Egypt, too, textile factories have collapsed or burned down multiple times. According to the International Labour Organization, over 50% of textile factories in developing countries are considered structurally unsafe or a fire hazard. Millions of workers go daily into buildings that are potential death traps. Rana Plaza was only the most visible symbol of a global problem. In the ruins of Rana Plaza, not only human lives were buried, but also the illusion that cheap consumption has no hidden costs. The pictures from Savar went around the world. Crushed bodies between colorful bales of fabric, desperate relatives searching for their loved ones, survivors who were pulled from the rubble after surviving for days without water and food. Reshma Begum was one of these survivors, 19 years old, trapped in an air pocket among the debris. She was rescued after 17 days, the last victim to be recovered alive. Her survival became a symbol of hope amidst the tragedy, but also a reminder that for every Reshma Begum, hundreds of others could not be saved. The international outrage after Rana Plaza was unprecedented. Activists, politicians, and consumers demanded change, but the textile industry had already known beforehand that its supply chains harbored deadly risks. Internal documents later showed that many international brands knew about the unsafe working conditions in their supplier factories, but looked away as long as the prices were right. The public pressure led to the founding of the Accord on Fire and Building Safety in Bangladesh, a legally binding agreement between international brands and trade unions. Over 200 companies committed to regularly inspecting their supplier factories and financing improvements in the event of safety deficiencies. In parallel, the Alliance for Bangladesh Worker Safety emerged, a similar initiative by US companies. These agreements led to measurable improvements. Thousands of factories were inspected, safety deficiencies identified and rectified. Emergency exits were cleared, fire escapes installed, structural weaknesses repaired. The number of workplace accidents in Bangladesh's textile industry dropped significantly. The minimum wage was increased multiple times, from $38 in 2013 to about $75 per month today, still one of the lowest worldwide, but a doubling. Yet 10 years after Rana Plaza, a mixed picture emerges. While the largest international brands monitor their supply chains better, smaller companies continue to produce under dangerous conditions. The price pressure has remained. The demand for cheap clothing has even increased, fueled by online shopping and social media, which have created even faster fashion cycles. New hotspots are emerging in other countries. Myanmar, Cambodia, Ethiopia, and Madagascar are attracting textile companies with even lower wages. The factories there are often just as unsafe as Bangladesh's textile industry before 2013. The problem has not been solved, it has only shifted. Sohail Rana, the owner of the collapsed building, was sentenced to death in 2017, a verdict that has a symbolic character but leaves the systemic causes of the disaster untouched. Most of the 38 other defendants received prison sentences, but the international brands that profited from the low production costs were never held accountable. Today, a memorial stands on the site of Rana Plaza. A modest plaque commemorates the 1,134 people who lost their lives here. Every April 24th, relatives, survivors, and activists gather to remember the victims. But for many families, the tragedy has never ended. Compensation payments were insufficient, medical care for the injured inadequate, psychological support practically non-existent. The story of Rana Plaza is more than the story of a building disaster. It is the story of a global economic system that puts profit above human lives. It shows us how our consumer choices in rich countries are directly connected to working conditions in poor countries. Every cheap t-shirt, every inexpensive pair of jeans carries the story of people working under conditions that we would never accept for ourselves. 10 years later, the question arises, what have we learned? The answer is complex. On the one hand, international pressure and agreements have led to real improvements. Factories in Bangladesh are safer today than in 2013. On the other hand, the world produces more clothing than ever before. Over 100 billion pieces per year. The hunger for cheap fashion is unbroken. The true legacy of Rana Plaza lies not in the statistics of improvement, but in the realization that every consumer has a choice. Every purchase is a vote for what kind of world we want. The 1,134 people who lost their lives on April 24, 2013, have become symbols of the hidden costs of our consumption, but also of the possibility of change. Their names are engraved in history, not only as victims of a tragedy, but as catalysts for a movement that continues to this day. A movement that reminds us that behind every seam, every fabric, every piece of clothing, human stories are hidden, stories of dreams, hopes, and all too often of suffering. Rana Plaza no longer stands, but its message heals through time. True change begins with the awareness that our actions have consequences, even on the other side of the world. In a globalized economy, we are all connected to one another, and the responsibility for safety and dignity in the workplace lies not only with factory owners or governments, but with each of us who makes decisions about what to buy and which companies to support. The rubble has long been cleared away, but the lessons of Rana Plaza remain, as a warning and at the same time a hope that change can arise from tragedies if we are willing to look and to act.